Okay, today's day 9 focus question for today, the end of the war. So the focus question is, why was the end of World War II so brutal? Let's start with question number 1. How did the Allies beat Germany? After many years of fighting against the Axis powers, the Allied powers beat Germany. The Allied powers are several countries allied together. So Britain, the US, the French, and the Soviets allied together to fight Germany. One of the main ways they beat Germany was to smush Germany in the middle between the vice grip of the British, American, French on this side and the Soviets on this side. I want to point out with this graph here that the Soviets sacrificed the most in this squeeze to the middle. If you look at the total number of casualties, you look at the Soviet toll, it is 25 million casualties, which is 14.2% of their total population. Sometimes when you say 25 million casualties, people say, well, yeah, but the Soviet Union's a giant country, has a lot of people in it. True, but the United States is also a giant country with lots of people in it, and we had casualties around 405,000, which is only 0.3% of our total population. So in terms of the proportion of the population, you can see here that Poland, the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, and Germany were among the most impacted, 17, 14, 11, and 8.8% of their populations. So the Allies beat Germany, but the Soviet Union sacrificed the most casualties of all of the Allies. If you look for the UK, they're way down here. France is a little further up here, but still nowhere near the same scale as the 25 million casualties that the Soviets suffered. Either way, the Soviets and the other allies, the US, the British, and the French, meet when they squeeze Germany in the middle here. Here's a pretty famous photo of Russian and other US and British forces shaking hands, and this was known as VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. Excuse me. One other last way that the Allies beat Germany is by breaking the Enigma code. The Enigma code was a German code used to communicate messages secretly. This is the Enigma machine. It worked like a kind of a typewriter that then typed coded letters. So every time you pressed a button, these wheels turned, and the message that came out typed was in code, not in German straight up. The British intelligence service, the code breakers at Bletchley Park, famously broke the Enigma code. So between Soviet casualty sacrifice, British Bletchley Park cryptologists breaking the code, and then largely US provided materiel, trucks, tanks, guns, the Allies were able to beat Germany. This leads us to this question, which is not 100% relevant to the overall question, but it is in that it's the question a lot of students ask. Why did Hitler kill himself? So you saw on the previous slide, the Germans were squeezed from both sides. At a certain point, Hitler realized that he was going to lose, that the Nazis were going to lose. We know that Hitler was taking a lot of drugs. We know subsequently from the records of his doctor that he was taking a lot of methamphetamines. Later on, after the attempt on his life where he survived an explosion, he was taking heroin and cocaine-derived medication. So he was on opiates. He was on a cocaine-derived painkiller after his eardrums burst in that explosion. So he's on a lot of drugs. He may or may not be in his right mind. And also some people speculate he was suffering from Parkinson's disease at the same time. As the Allies squeezed in, it became apparent that he was not going to survive, that the Nazis were not going to survive the war. The Nazis were going to lose their fight, and he did not want to be captured, so he committed suicide. He and his girlfriend here, Eva Braun, they got married. About 40 hours later, they killed themselves. They both took a cyanide pill, and then Hitler also, before the cyanide took effect, shot himself in the head. We know this happened because his remains were later, way later, discovered in a Soviet archive. He took the poison, he shot himself in the head, and then his Nazi guards and assistants took the body outside and covered it in gasoline and burnt it, which is why there was no body for the Allies to discover when they arrived. Soviet soldiers took the pieces of the body back to the Soviet Union, where they were held secretly for many years. Recently, the body parts, and these are some photos of, yes, Hitler's actual teeth, they were recently tested for DNA, and in fact, they are truly Hitler's teeth. Also, pieces of his skull with a hole in it from the gunshot wound. So, unless Hitler was out hiding in another country without a skull and without a jaw, he definitely died that day. His bunker was ransacked. This is a photo of a soldier, an Allied soldier, in his bunker afterwards. The Allies were kind of caught off guard by him dying so suddenly. There was no victory to capturing him. And then lots of other prominent Nazis, like these people here. This is the deputy mayor of Leipzig and his wife and his daughter. They committed suicide as well. Many prominent Nazis killed themselves, either in depression from the loss of the war or in depression from the idea of living in a world without Adolf Hitler. This brings us to the other side of the Atlantic, the United States. The US pursued the Manhattan Project. What was the Manhattan Project? It was a top secret project, a top secret government funded mission to create the world's first nuclear weapons. It was started in a kind of race against Nazi Germany. Escaped German Jewish scientists told the United States that the Nazis were planning to build a nuclear weapon. Thus, the United States started building our own nuclear weapon to counteract the Nazi scientists. Then, with the intention of using it on the Nazis, on Germany, on Hitler. The bomb was finally developed, though a little bit too late to be used on Hitler, and he died. The war ended in Europe, and we had a nuclear weapon. What is a nuclear weapon, and what makes it different from a regular weapon? Well, without going into the chemistry of it, basically a nuclear weapon, an atomic weapon, for the sake of this class, those mean the same thing. They take the nucleus of an atom and slam a neutron into it, and then each time, so then you slam a neutron into this atom, say uranium, and that causes the atom to split into other atoms and then have loose neutrons, which then slam into those other atoms, which then cause a split and then another split and then another split. It's way more complicated than that, obviously, but this is good enough for us to understand right here. So basically, if you have uranium in this half of the bomb and in this half of the bomb, and you start this chain reaction by slamming these two pieces together using a detonator and a conventional sort of explosive charge, then you can have a tremendous explosion, far larger than any other conventional bomb. In fact, it is the equivalent of, the first bomb was the equivalent of 15,000 tons of TNT. The second one was the equivalent of 21,000 tons of TNT, and subsequently even more powerful. This is a photo of how the range of the first atomic bomb, if it were dropped on the center of San Jose, you can see there's San Jose High on the right, there's Lincoln High School on the left. If the bomb was dropped right in the middle, say on Horace Mann Elementary or City Hall, this is the range of absolute destruction for the very first atomic nuclear weapon, and then subsequent bombs would be even larger than that. So, with the war over in Europe, the US asked Japan if they surrendered. And Japan and the Japanese government said, of course, no, we do not surrender. We will never surrender. So we threatened them. We said, if you don't surrender, we are going to bomb you. And they said, I'd like to see you try. So the US decided to bomb Hiroshima, a city full of civilians, but had some military factories. They produced some military goods in it. And we dropped the first bomb, flown over in a B-29, dropped at 31,000 feet. It fell for 43 seconds. It detonated 1,900 feet above the ground, as designed. The people of Hiroshima experienced a bright flash of light, an intense wave of heat, followed by flying debris, fires, and radiation poisoning. In the very center of the ground zero, so to speak, here's the before photo, here's the after photo. Everything pretty much is obliterated. Everything pretty much disappears, including the people. This is one of those famous Hiroshima shadows. The person who was standing here when the blast happened, that flash of light was so intense that it kind of exposed the shadow of the person onto the steps, like as if it were like a photograph. Immediately following the flash and the intense heat, the area on the outskirts of the city would have experienced flying debris and burning bits of buildings, broken glass, etc. That's what this photo here is intended to show you. This is a maybe 10-year-old girl, and she was hit with a lot of debris, like flying pieces of glass and wood from all these buildings. And then in that outer ring, everything was superheated so that it caught on fire. These people are running away from the fires. They're running away to the outskirts of the city. And then even further out, people who survived the fire, people who survived the debris and the explosion would then suffer from nuclear radiation, from radioactive fallout. So radiation and radioactive fallout are the radioactive isotopes that fall from the sky for days, weeks, months after the explosion, causing cancers in that generation and subsequent generations. Here's one of the survivors showing off his scars from surviving the experience. A few days after the explosion at Hiroshima, the United States government asked the Japanese government if they surrendered, with the threat of dropping another bomb. The Japanese government did not surrender. We did not tell them where we were going to bomb. We just told them that we would. They did not surrender, and so we bombed the city of Nagasaki with a second bomb, slightly different from the first one, slightly more powerful, and another additional 40,000 people died instantly. After that second bomb, the Japanese government decided to surrender. This is a photo of a delegation from the Japanese government on a U.S. naval vessel surrendering to the United States Navy, and this was known as VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day. VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day. All right, there's all the questions for today. And then the DFQ for this one is a speculation and your own opinion. Why do you think all of this was so brutal? And then the reading to follow this is the survivor accounts from Hiroshima.